Thank you, Chairman. You're very welcome to any time I have left, because I don't believe I'm going to use up the 20 minutes. It's probably just me, Minister, but I find something extraordinarily ironic and surreal about this debate tonight in this House on the impact of Brexit on this country. We're talking about having to cut this, cut that, jobs will be lost, services curtailed, need to save funds. It's a bit like a throwback to the dire warnings of the austerity years. But if only we had access to some sources of income to help us through this potential danger. If only we could get our hands on, say, for example, 14.3 billion, which is subject to a court case as we speak in Europe, money that is ours, that we rewarded. It's called the Apple tax. It accumulated from 13 to 14.3 billion as it sits in the escrow account. We have spent over 7 million on legal fees to defend this country against taking that money. How ridiculous do we look in this period when we're facing into all that danger of job losses, of farmers being hurt, of border communities being affected, and we're saying, no thanks, we'll defend Apple. The very, very wealthy 1%, we'll defend them against the ordinary people of this country, north and south. And at the same time, we will refuse to publish our plans. I don't believe, like other deputies have said, that you don't have plans. I believe you have very detailed plans and advice on what this government envisages will happen in the case of a hard Brexit, of a crash out. I believe that exists. I believe there's a refusal to publish it. For some bizarre communication policy of Fine Gael, just like they refuse to publish details on cervical check and other very serious issues, they are refusing to publish the advice and plans that I have around the Brexit deal. But the British government have published theirs, and the British government were forced to do so and have published very hard scenarios on their own people. The irony, though, however, and other deputies mentioned the Yellowhammer report, is that all of the real hardship being suffered by the British people has completely gone under the radar for the last 2 years because of Brexit. Nobody ever hear talk of the mention of the housing crisis in Britain, which I believe is deeper and worse and more systemic than ours, the health crisis, the crisis in education, the cuts to welfare, the rise in suicides. There's very, very deep issues at the heart of British society that we don't even hear about because of Brexit. So I can understand why some sources from Britain really want to get it over with so that they can start talking about the real issues that affect them. But really what I want to talk about is the preparation that you guys have for a hard Brexit. We don't know about that, but what we are getting drip-fed is the preparation for a hard budget. Perhaps we're not going to be able to increase the social protection payments like our colleagues in Fianna Fáil are saying that they want to see given. Perhaps we may not be able to give the Christmas bonus. There may be cutbacks in other aspects of public spending. But I think that this is a cover for having made a bags of public expenditure, and in particular on the overspend on the Children's Hospital and the National Broadband Plan. It's a shame that the Taoiseach has left the room, but I did want to ask him in particular to explain the disparity between his take on a hard border and that of the Taoiseach Leo Varadkar, because you have two leaders of the Irish government not disagreeing with each other publicly, but giving us different stories about what they mean by a hard border, and that hard border being imposed on us by either the EU or the Irish government, when in this chamber, I don't know how many times we stood here or sat here and listened to the Taoiseach telling us implicitly, explicitly, there will be no hard border on the island of Ireland. We heard Michel Barnier and Jean-Claude Juncker tell us explicitly there will be no hard border on the island of Ireland. But it looks like we are going to be thrown under a bus by both the EU and the Fine Gael-led government. But the question I would have for the Taoiseach is, when is a hard border a hard border? Is it when it's 10 yards or 20 yards or 50 yards or 100 yards or maybe 10 metres or 100 metres away from the actual border? He says that maybe need for temporary and emergency checks. Well, if they're temporary, why do we need them at all? And then the Taoiseach says to the British and Irish Chamber that there will be need for some level of checks on the border. We need clarity on this. We absolutely need clarity. We're not getting it, and it's not even opposing parties who are feeding us different stories. It's the same leadership of the same government. But as was said earlier on, tolerating a hard border cannot even be countenanced. There should be no return to a threat to our peace, our stability, our security on this island. And any talk of putting border posts or check along the border, or even 100 yards or 100 metres away from them, cannot be tolerated. I think, most importantly, this government has to come clean on what advice, what plans, what impact analysis they have received from professionals, from civil servants, from legal opinion, to come clean and tell the elected members of this Parliament what they actually know and what they actually perceive to be the case. You cannot keep it secret. There is a moral obligation for you to respect this House and respect the members of this House, and let us know what you plan in the event of a hard Brexit. For example, a simple thing which was pointed out to me by a friend of mine who works in the milling industry in the north. The price of flour. How are we going to find ways to stop a tariff coming on flour that comes from industrialised mills? There's 3 of them in this country that mill flour on an industrial scale. 2 of them are in the north, and the output, 60% of the output from 2 of them comes south. Now, if there's a tariff of €172 per tonne to be put on that, are we going to see a sharp rise in the price of bread? And what will the impact be for poorer families? The price of bread is notoriously and historically a trigger for all sorts of problems in an economy. Are we going to put that tariff on the flour from Northern Ireland, which produces our bread, or are we going to locate the flour elsewhere? And put a whole pile of workers in Northern Ireland out of work as a consequence of that. There are very detailed implications that we don't know about, and that certainly, no, we don't know about them. You haven't said whether those plans are afoot or not. It's increasingly obvious that you're trying to use a no-deal Brexit as an excuse for punitive measures on ordinary people. And if you're not able to increase social welfare or pay the Christmas bonus or honour your promises that you've made to public sector workers, but ironically may be able to impose an increase in carbon tax and refuse the Apple tax, then you are showing us that your interests are in stark contrast with what you say they are. The last thing I want to talk about is the question of a border poll. Lord Ashcroft's recently conducted poll in the north was done on the basis of no clause contained in it for in the event of a no-deal scenario. And that showed that 51% of the people across Northern Ireland, and I'm aware it's just a poll, would favour a border poll, would favour United Ireland in the event of a border poll. And this is important, and it's not trying to scaremonger among the unionist community. Rather, it's trying to say that the terms of the Good Friday Agreement already state that if at any time it appears likely to the Secretary of State that a majority of those voting would express a wish that Northern Ireland should cease to be part of the UK and form part of United Ireland, then that border poll should be conducted. Now, it's a slim margin, but let's suppose, and we believe it will happen unless real action is taken, Brexit turns out to be a disaster for the people of Northern Ireland who, let us remind ourselves, voted against it. But there's an opportunity there for us to do something real. In that event, shouldn't we set out to win the hearts and minds of all people, Protestant, Catholic and none, or no religion, and all working people, all farmers, all industry, across the community, to say to them that we have common cause in conducting a border poll that may look for a new kind of Ireland, a united Ireland that wouldn't reflect the existing one, that is set up in the interests of a minority of super-rich, of a landlord class, of the elite, but one that functions on both parts of the island in the interests of ordinary people, the real people who do all the hard work and who bear the brunt of all the policies of both governments, north and south. We could show our kind of commitment to that sort of justice, that sort of social equality, by acting now and withdrawing from the Apple tax case. Pull out of it before we have to pay any more legal fees, and take 14.3 billion home in our back pockets to help deal with the hardship that's going to be imposed on communities. Once again, Minister, we are calling for honesty and openness, full openness and full disclosure of what the plans are from this government in the event of a hard Brexit. As I say, I believe they exist. The British government, who everybody is entertained by their carry-on in Westminster these days, we look so boring compared to them, but at least they did publish their full plans, whereas you guys are holding back, and that is up to the point that we're nearly facing a hard Brexit. This is not on. It's not fair to the people of this island, north or south.
Thank you, Deputy Smith.